Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah, wonderful. Uh, Glad to have some audience. Okay, so I hope this screen share is now working. So do you see Zernal at your end?
Yes, ma'am.
The okay, excellent. Yeah. So just quickly recall what we did last time. So we defined what is the meaning of a partition of an interval, and for a bounded function f, we and for a bounding function defined on a closed and bounded interval ab, we defined the lower and upper sum of this function f relative to a fixed partition of the interval ab in the following manner. Sum is denoted by UPF. This is the summation of mi xi plus 1 minus xi, where what is a mi? The capital Mi is the supremum of f restricted to the ith subinterval xi plus 1. Yeah? So basically in this picture here, it is the area of a box with the base, the ith subinterval xi plus 1 and height capital Mi. Yeah? So we talked about it last time. Yeah, we are trying to in sort of approximate the entire area below the graph of f in the interval AB, and in order to do that, we are considering partitions of the interval AB and approximating it from below and above by the UPF and the LPF, which is the upper sum and the lower sum, right? Um, so this is one candidate. Now what happens if we add more points to a partition, right? This is what I was trying to draw last time. So suppose I consider a partition Q such that every point of the partition P is a point in the partition Q, and I have one more point, right? So then how does the upper sum of the partition with respect to the partition Q compare with the upper sum with respect to the partition P? Yeah, so let's try to write that down. Yeah. So Q has just one more point than P. Yeah. Let me write it down. This is a small observation. So I hope everybody is with me up till this point. So let P equal to x1, x2, xn be a partition of the interval AB, right? And suppose that Q has just one more point than P. Yeah. So let Q be P union another point T. Yeah, or maybe I'll just write, yeah, maybe let's just denote this point T. Yeah. So suppose that where is T? Where T is let's say in the kth subinterval. Yeah. So sorry, the point Y is in the kth subinterval. Yeah. So what I mean is I have xk, I have y, and then I have xk plus 1 and all other points. Yeah. So xn is the point B and x1 is the point A. This is by the definition of the partition. So Q is another partition of the interval AB. Q has more points than the partition P. It has one more point. Yeah. So let's compare the upper sum with respect to the partitions Q and F. Yeah. So let me write this. The upper sum with respect to the partition P minus the upper sum with respect to the partition Q, right? Okay. So so what is this? Remember, what is the definition of the upper sum? Let's just scroll up and see. The upper sum, having fixed a partition P of the interval AB, the upper sum is given by this, right? So you consider the supremum of f restricted to this ith subinterval and multiply with the length of the subinterval and sum it over all subintervals. Yeah. So when I'm taking the difference between the upper sum and the upper sum corresponding to the partition P and upper sum corresponding to the partition Q, since Q has just one more point than the partition P, all other terms in the sum vanish except for those coming from the kth subinterval. So what I mean is, I mean that I will have the supremum of f over the kth subinterval, which is the notation is mk, the length of the kth subinterval, which is xk plus 1 minus xk. So this is the contribution from the upper sum corresponding to the partition P minus what? So minus the supremum of f. So I need to introduce a variable here. So let me call it t. So the supremum of f over the subinterval what xk to y times the length of this subinterval, which is y minus xk, correct? And there's one more term, minus the supremum of f restricted to the subinterval y to xk plus 1 times the length of the subinterval xk plus 1 minus y. Is this okay? Is everybody with me up till this point? That if you, yes, tell me one more. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said clearly. Can you please say that again?
Ma'am, can you please repeat?
See, what am I trying to say here? Let's just go back to this picture here. See, P is a fixed partition of the interval AB and Q has just one more point. Yeah, so in what I have drawn, Q has just one more point, and that point Y, suppose it belongs to the kth subinterval, right? So all of this is K here, right? So when I'm taking the difference between the upper sum corresponding to the kth subinterval, when I'm taking the difference, which difference that I am considering? I am considering the upper sum corresponding to the partition P minus the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q. Yeah. So which means that by definition, you will have the following thing, right? You will have the length of the subinterval x1, x2. So you will have x2 minus x1 times the supremum of f restricted to this subinterval, right? This is the contribution from the partition P. A similar term will appear in the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q, and hence that will cancel it out. Is that correct? Now next would be the term x3 minus x2 times the supremum of f restricted to this subinterval. A similar term will appear in the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q. So all other terms will cancel out. The ones will remain will be the ones which correspond to the kth subinterval, namely xk plus 1. So you will have xk plus 1 minus xk times the supremum of f restricted to this subinterval, which is mk. Now this term will appear in the upper sum corresponding to the partition P, and what else? You will have I've written it in 1. So you will have y minus xk times the supremum of f restricted to the kth restricted to this interval. So let me just write it down. I sort of mixed up. So this is mi star and this is xk here, right? So I will have the supremum of f restricted to the interval xky times the length of this subinterval y minus xk, and one more term. Yeah, so I will have one more term, which is the following. I will look at xk plus 1 minus y times the supremum of f. So I'll just write that down. So I will have the supremum of f restricted to x interval xk plus 1, sorry, y is smaller, right? So y to xk plus 1, so this is the supremum of f. So let me denote it by mi double star. And in this picture, what is mi double star? In this picture, mi double star is the same. You know, this is mi double star. Is that correct? Is everybody with me? That's
Yes,
what I have written. Yes. And you know, so what happens, you know, now if you consider this gray box, so earlier what we were approximating, the earlier the upper sum corresponding to the partition P was this blue box, and now if you look at the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q, that is this gray box. So let me sort of where is my marker? Sorry, so that is this gray box. Sorry, let me just fix this. So that is this gray box, so which means that all of this, right? So, you know, the area of this gray box is smaller than the area of the blue box, yeah, which means that the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q is smaller than the upper sum corresponding to the partition P. So, you know, the upshot of all of this discussion is, I'll just do it rigorously, but you know, the upshot of all of this discussion is that if you add more and more points to the partition, you get a better approximation to the area. Why is that? Because you know, this blue box, what does it do? It contains the entire area below the graph of f, right? So you are, by considering this gray box instead of the blue box, I'm getting a better approximation to the area under the graph of f. Everybody agrees with me on this? Is that correct? Yeah, so this is mk star. There's no I here, sorry. Is this okay? Sorry, there's no I here in all of this. Is this okay with everybody? So let me sort of do it analytically. Maybe it will make sense to you. Okay, so we wrote down what is the difference upper sum minus the of the upper sum of the function f corresponding to the partition P minus the upper sum of the function f corresponding to the partition Q, right? And now let's compare, right? So I'll just keep the first term as it is, not disturb it. So this is xk plus 1 minus xk. Yeah. Remember what is mk? Remember what is mk? Mk is the supremum of f. So let me use x restricted to the kth subinterval xk plus 1. This is something to remember. Okay. So now, you know, mk, which is the supremum of f restricted to the xk plus 1 interval, is going to be this bigger than the supremum of f, you know, because this is a supremum over a larger set, which means that the following inequality will hold true. Yeah, I can replace this by mk and I will have this. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm just comparing if A is a subset of B, how does the supremum of A compare with the supremum of B, right? And this is nothing but 0. Is that correct? So the upshot of all of this discussion is that if Q is a partition of the interval AB, having just one more point than the partition P, then UPF is bigger than UQF. Is that correct? Is that correct? Is everybody with me on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so I can do this iteratively now. Now consider another partition of the interval AB by adding 2 more points to the partition P. Yeah. So for example, if Q prime is another partition of the interval AB, which has K more points than the partition P, so you repeat this reasoning K times, and what will follow is that as you add more and more points, upper sums decrease. Yes, yeah. And likewise, a similar analysis show that the lower sum increase. So I'll just sort of write it down, maybe just too much to process orally. So if Q prime is another partition of the interval AB that contains K more points than the given partition P, then what do? You repeat the above reasoning K times, adding 1 point at each stage. So all of it together says that upper sums increase, sorry, the upper sums, so let me see, hence the upper sums increase, what am I saying, the upper sums decrease, yeah, the partition Q, the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q is always smaller, yeah, so the upper sums decrease when we add more points into the partition. Right? Is this okay? Yeah, so I think, so there is a certain monotonicity property here to state that, let me introduce this definition. Yeah. So this is the definition. A partition Q of the interval AB is said to be a refinement of the partition P if every point of P is a point of Q. Yeah, so what does this mean? This just means that we have just thrown in extra subintervals to P to form Q. Correct? Is that okay? Is everybody with me so far?
Yes, ma'am. Why are we saying that it is a refinement of?
See, we are adding more points to this partition, right? So there is a finer partition.
Okay,
As you said, right, the more the points we add, the better the approximation we get to the area. Yeah, so we just saw that after adding 1 point, we got this gray box, which gives a better approximation to the graph of F, to the area under the graph of F than the blue box. So when you add more points, you get better approximation. So more points means finer the partition, right? So that's why it's called as refinement.
okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Is that okay? This is a new language. So what we have stated upstairs, what is the observation that we did upstairs? Let me just write it down clearly in the language of refinements. let f be a bounded function right, and let P be a partition of the interval AB and Q be a refinement of the partition P. Yeah, so remember this means that every point of P is a point of Q, and we have thrown in some more points in Q, yeah, to create some extra subintervals. So then, you know, what is that we saw upstairs? We saw that if we add 1 point, then the upper sums decrease. Yeah. And, you know, Q is obtained by refining P. You know, Q is obtained by adding finitely many more points to P, because after all, Q is another partition of P, of the interval AB. So Q has at max finitely many points. So you can iterate that argument again and again to get that the upper sum corresponding to the partition Q is going to be always smaller than the upper sum corresponding to the partition P. Yeah. And a similar statement is true for the lower sums also, where, you know, exactly the same proof as above works. All you have to do is replace the supremum by infimum everywhere. So this is saying, I'll say that one more time, that as we add more and more points into the partition, the upper sums decrease and the lower sums increase. Again, I would say that is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, in view of this, we make the following definition. What is this definition? You define, so given, so let f be a bounded function. Right. Let's define the following two quantities, right? So yeah, so let's look at P, a partition of the interval AB, and let's consider the upper sum corresponding to the partition P. Yeah. So as we add more and more points into the partition P, you get a finer and finer partition, right? And these upper sums, the you know, UPF, the upper sums, as we saw in the picture above, contains the area under the graph of F. So, you know, what does it do? Yeah, so the upper sums contain the entire area below the graph of F, right? And so this is first, and the second thing is, as we add more and more partitions, we the upper sums decrease. So that means that you get a better and better and better approximation to the area under the graph of F. So keeping this in mind, you define this quantity as the infimum. So you take the infimum, so you have the upper sum corresponding to the partition P of the function f, and you take the infimum over all possible partitions of the interval AB. Now this quantity is what is known as the upper Riemann integral of the function f. So this is a definition. And similarly, you consider the lower sum corresponding to the partition P, and you allow the supremum over all partitions P of the interval AB. This quantity is called as the, and this is the notation, the lower Riemann integral of f with respect to, so on the interval AB. Yeah. So why are they defined and things like that? We will address in a moment. But let me say the following. So define the upper and the lower Riemann integral of f over the interval AB in the following manner. So let me just clarify what is this notation, where the supremum and the infimum, where the extremum are taken over all possible partitions of, so let me see, all possible partitions P of the interval AB. Now, the first thing one should ask is that note that these are defined for all functions f which are bounded. Why do this supremum and the infimum of the upper and the lower sum respectively make sense? Yeah, so let's go back to this definition of the upper sum. See, here it is. The definition of having fixed the partition P of the interval AB, the definition of the upper sum is, so remember this capital MI is the supremum of F restricted to the ith subinterval times the length of the ith subinterval. So, what information do I need in order to say that the infimum of UPF, infimum exists as I allow P to vary over all possible partitions of the interval AB? When does an infimum exist? What is that you know about infimums? What is that
If
you
it
know
is
about?
bounded below.
No, so first the set has to be non-empty, and the other thing is that it has to be bounded below. So do we have that here? Can you find a lower bound for me? And likewise, the lower sum is summation little mi times the length of the ith subinterval, where little mi is the infimum of f restricted to the ith subinterval. See, look here. So please don't get too lost in the notation. See, UPF is, so capital MI is the supremum of F on the ith subinterval, right? So capital MI for each I is going to be bounded above by, so let me write here. I think this is too much for you to process orally. See, F is bounded, right, by assumption, which means that there is a number, so let's call it K, such that this bound is true. Is that correct? There is some real number K such that mod of F is always bounded by this real number K, correct, throughout the interval AB. Is that okay? This is using the information that F is given to be a bounded function. Is this okay with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now the next observation is, in particular, this implies that the supremum of F over the ith subinterval is going to be bounded by K. And this is true for each I. Correct? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So in particular, this implies that if you fix a partition P of interval AB and you look at the upper sum corresponding to this partition, then that is going to be bounded by K times the length of the interval AB. Because each of these MIs you can replace by K and then you can pull it out of the summation. What remains is the sum of these subintervals, which is nothing but the length of the interval AB. Correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and a similar statement is true about the lower sums also. Right? So that is the reason that the infimum and the supremum of all this makes sense. Is that okay? Is everybody with me? So it is very crucial that the function that we start off with is bounded. All of that is built in here in these definitions. Is that okay? So I'll just write that here after defining these, that note that this is something for you to check. Note that these two notation, the upper and the lower Roman integral, are defined for all bounded functions f. Is that okay? Is everybody with me? Is everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay, all right. Now, having defined the upper and the Roman integral, we say that a function is integrable if the upper and the lower integral both coincide. Yeah, so let me just write that down. This is the final definition. So if f is a bounded function, then f is integrable. So when do we say that f is integrable? This is denoted by f is Riemann integral. So R here stands for Riemann integral beable on the interval AB. If the upper Riemann integral of f, which is the quantity that we just defined, coincides with the lower Riemann integral of the function f. And in that case, when this happens, we write what do we write? So the upper Riemann integral agrees with the lower Riemann integral, and we write the integral of f as the common value. So if this looks too intimidating because of the notation, please don't worry. Just hang on for another 10 minutes or so, and we will see some examples. The first thing is, so is this definition okay with everybody? You define the upper sums, you define the lower sums, you sort of first study this monotonicity property of the upper sums and the lower sums. That is, the upper sums decrease and the lower sums increase when we add more points into the partition. Define the upper integral, the Riemann and the lower integral. When the two agree, you say that the function is integrable. This is what we have done so far. Is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So let's just make this observation. So maybe let me call it as a lemma. So for any partition, P of the interval AB and a fixed bounded function F, defined on the same interval, the following always holds true. Yeah, what is it? Yeah. So let me consider the lower sum corresponding to the partition P of the function f. Yeah, LPF. Remember, remember how did we define the lower integral? The lower integral by definition is the supremum over the lower sums, where the supremum is taken over all possible partitions of the interval AB. Yeah, which means that if you fix one partition, you know, this is just by the definition of the supremum, that this inequality is always true. Yeah, the lower Riemann integral of f is always bounded below by the lower sum, correct? And similarly, if you look at the upper integral, that is always bounded above by the upper sum. Correct? Is that okay? It's just from the definition of the lower integral and the upper integral. They are defined as, you know, supremum, infimum of some quantities. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
the point of this inequality is that I want to prove an inequality here, right? So the only inequality that is not obvious in this case is the one between the integrals. Right? And we will prove that. And by the way, you know, I will just write it in green ink that if the bounds for f are, let's say, capital M and little m, because m is bounded the function f is bounded on the interval AB, then the upper sum is going to be bounded by this quantity and the lower sum is going to be bounded by this quantity. This is something you can verify on your own. We just did it, but I'll just take this opportunity to write this down. Anyways, so coming back to this lemma, the only inequality that is not obvious in this lemma is the one between the integrals. So let's fix that. Yeah. So I'll write that down, that all other inequalities are routine, and we will focus our energy on showing that that the lower integral of f is always bounded by the upper integral. This inequality is always true. Yeah, so I need to fix this. Yeah, is that okay? So remember, what is the lower integral? The lower integral is the supremum of over the lower sums, and the upper integral is the infimum over the upper sums, where the infimum and the supremum respectively are taken over all possible partitions of the interval AB. Correct? Okay. Let's see. How do we do this? Yeah. So I'm going to do the following. So I'm going to say that fix an epsilon positive and let me consider the following quantity. Yeah. So I'm going to consider the lower integral of f minus epsilon by 2. Yeah. So maybe in red ink, I'll just remind the definitions here on this sort of portion that is visible at your end. So this is the upper integral. Remember the definition. This is the infimum over the upper sums, where the infimum is taken over all possible partitions, and the lower integral is the supremum over the lower sums, where the supremum is taken over all possible partitions. So this is the lower integral. Yeah. So what happens is, when I am considering this lower integral minus epsilon by 2, then what am I doing here? When I'm considering having fixed an epsilon positive, the lower integral by definition is the supremum of some quantity, which means it's the least upper bound. And by taking minus epsilon by 2, I am considering something which is smaller than the least upper bound, which means that it cannot be an upper bound, which means that there must exist a partition P of the interval AB such that what happens? Can somebody help me? So I say that there must exist a partition sorry, what am I doing? So is everybody with me? All I'm trying to say is that lower integral is the supremum of some quantity. Now I'm taking the lower integral minus epsilon, which means that this is less than the least upper bound, which means that it cannot be an upper bound, which means that there must be a partition of the interval AB. Let me give it a name, P1, such that the following inequality is obeyed. So this is the lower sum corresponding to the partition P1. And I should have a strict inequality here. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yes. And likewise, let me look at the following thing. Likewise, let me look at the upper sum. Well, not the upper sum. Let me look at the upper integral, which is given as the infimum of something, which means that it is the greatest lower bound. So let me consider something which is bigger than the greatest lower bound. So let me consider the upper integral plus epsilon by 2. Now this is bigger than the greatest lower bound, which means that this cannot be a lower bound, which means that there exist partitions P1 and P2 of the interval AB such that the upper sum corresponding to the partition P2 satisfies this inequality. Correct? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Now what do I want to do? Yeah. Now what will I do? I will say let me set P as the common refinement of P1 and P2. Yeah, which means that I throw in all the subintervals, all the points of P1, and I throw in all the points of P2, right? So then what happens? Yeah. Now we noted this, that if we add more points to a partition, then the upper sums decrease, which means that how do I compare the upper sum corresponding to the partition P with respect to the upper sum corresponding to the partition P2? This way the inequality holds true, correct? Yeah, this is what we just observed, which means that so this is one observation, and the upper sum corresponding to the partition P is always, this inequality is always true. Yeah. The lower sum corresponding to the partition P is going to be bounded by the upper sum corresponding to the partition P. This is by the definition of the lower sum. And now, how do I compare the lower sum corresponding to the partition P with respect to the lower sum corresponding to the partition P1? I have the following inequality. This is again by the observation above that lower sums decrease, the lower sums increase when we add more points into the partition. Yeah, so setting P as the common refinement, note that the following is true. Yes? Is that okay? And now I will put it together with this inequality star. So if I put it together with this inequality star, then what will I get? So what do I mean by that? I will have, I will use this. The lower sum corresponding to the partition P1 is at least as big as the lower integral. Yeah. So I have a lower integral here plus epsilon by 2, right? This is from inequality star. Now this term is bounded above by the lower sum corresponding to the partition P plus an epsilon by 2. Now this term here is bounded by the upper sum corresponding to the partition P plus an epsilon by 2. Now, the last term in this chain of inequalities is bounded by the upper sum corresponding to the partition P2 plus epsilon by 2. But the way the partition P2 was chosen, then the upper sum corresponding to the partition P2 is bounded above by the upper integral of the function f plus epsilon. Is that okay? So if you sort of forget about the intermediate inequalities, then this gives that the lower integral, I'll put the lower integral of f and the upper integral of f satisfy the following inequality. So let epsilon tend to 0 to conclude. To conclude what? To conclude that the lower integral of f is always bounded by the upper integral of f. Is this okay with everybody? See, this is a very common trick that comes very, very handy. So the upper integral and lower integral are both defined as infimum and supremum with respect to the lower sums and upper sums, right? So you have one partition each, you know, P1 and P2, which almost approximates this upper integral and the lower integral. You use this trick, you use P to be the common refinement of P1 and P2, you get one partition which approximates both of them. Is this okay? You know, please do let me know if you are lost. Is everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. You know, this was just an observation on the side that the lower integral is always less than or equal to upper integral. Yeah. So if you go back to the definition of integrable functions, we say that a function is integrable if the lower integral and the upper integral agree. Yeah. And what does this lemma say? This lemma says, you know, if you just focus on the inequality between the integrals, that the lower integral is always bounded by the upper integral. If you have to prove that a function is integrable, all you have to prove is that the upper integral is bounded by the lower integral. The other inequality, which is not in this lemma, that is true. The other inequality between these two, upper and the lower integrals. Is that okay? Because one-way inequality is always true, no matter which bounded function you are working with. Is this okay?
Ma'am, can you please repeat?
So all I'm trying to say is, see, I'm trying to say this. I'll just write that down. So all I'm trying to say is, by definition, f is integrable on the interval AB if the upper integral of f is equal to the lower integral of f. Yes. However, this lemma tells us that the lemma that we just proved tells us that the following inequality always holds true. Correct? Is that okay? This is what we have proved. So all I'm trying to say is that to prove that a function f is integrable on an interval AB, it suffices to show that what suffices? That the lower integral and the upper integral satisfy this inequality. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll just say this. This is by the lemma that we just proved. If you're wondering where does this come from. Correct? Okay. So there is one more equivalent characterization of integrability. This is a definition. Let me do that. Yeah. So this is a theorem. So let f be bounded then f is integrable in the sense of the definition that we have given, if and only if for each positive epsilon there is a partition P of the interval AB such that the difference between the upper sum and the lower sum corresponding to this partition can be made smaller than this prescribed epsilon. This is very, very useful because this condition uses only one partition, whereas when dealing with both the upper and the lower integrals, one needs to approximate with two partitions, one which approximates the upper integral and one which approximates the lower integral. If you stare hard at the proof of the lemma that we did, we actually proved this theorem. So I will sort of skip the proof of this theorem. This is actually there in the proof of the lemma that we just did. Instead, there's one more thing that I would like to do before we see many, many examples. But the statement of the theorem, does that make sense to everybody? You give me any epsilon and I will be able to demonstrate to you a partition of the interval AB such that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than epsilon. If that happens, for every choice of epsilon positive, we say that the function is integrable. Yeah, we will actually see some examples and apply this theorem. Yeah, hang on for another 5 minutes. So is this okay? The statement of the theorem, is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let me just give some genuine example of integrable functions. Maybe another 2 minutes. Yeah. So let's consider f to be a function defined on the interval a b, and let this function be continuous. Yeah. So so this is a closed and bounded interval AB, and f is continuous. So a continuous function will take a compact set onto a compact set. In particular, the image of f, the image of the interval AB under f would be a compact set. In particular, it will be bounded. So, we don't have to assume f to be bounded here separately. It is, follows as a consequence, right? Because I insisted that as far as integrability is concerned, we will be always concerned with only bounded functions. Says that f is integrable in the sense that we defined of f. Every continuous function is integrable. Yeah. So what we will do is, in order to prove this statement, we will use theorem 1, yeah, which means that we will fix a positive epsilon arbitrarily and say that there is a partition of the interval AB so that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than epsilon. So let's just quickly see the proof. I think the proof here is very, very insightful. It helps you, do many examples. In what way? Let me just sort of. So how do we choose a partition of the interval AB such that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than epsilon? How do we do that? So here is one way to go about it. Yeah. But before that, let's make this observation. So since the interval AB is compact and f is continuous function defined on a compact set, the first thing we note is that f is going to be uniformly continuous on the interval AB. Correct? Which means that given any epsilon positive, there would be a delta that will work simultaneously for all the points of the interval AB, which means that there is a delta such that if x and y are in the interval AB with distance at most delta apart, then their images are at most distance epsilon apart. Right? Is that okay? Now we will use this information to construct a partition of the interval AB. Yeah. So you construct a partition of the interval AB. So choose P. So what is a partition of the interval AB? It's a finite bunch of points. Choose P, a partition of the interval AB, such that for each subinterval, the length of this subinterval is at most delta, and this is true for each I. What is this delta? This delta is the one which we get courtesy the uniform continuity of f. So you choose a partition of the interval AB in such a manner that any two adjacent points are at most delta distance apart. Is that okay? Is everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you fix delta first, and then x1 is the point A. Yeah, remember, and so x1 is the point B A. You choose the next point x2 in such that the distance between x1 and x2 is at most delta, and you do that iteratively to get to the endpoint B, right? And this can be done in finitely many steps. Okay, so what is the whole point of this choosing this? So then what do? Then what is that we want to do? I want to consider the upper sum corresponding to this partition P minus the lower sum. See, what am I trying to do? I am going to use theorem 1. So I am going to say that this particular partition is such that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than the prescribed epsilon. So let me consider this difference. So this, let's recall, by definition, this means what I have. So this is capital Mi, xi plus 1 minus xi minus little mi, xi plus 1 minus xi. Yeah? Recall, what is this notation? Capital Mi is the supremum of f restricted to the ith subinterval, and little mi is the infimum of f restricted to the ith subinterval. Correct? Yeah. Now I have to approximate this, right? So I'm going to write it in the following manner. So I'm going to say that this is the same as mi, capital Mi minus xi plus 1 minus xi. Correct? Is that correct? Now, what do I say? I say the following. Yeah. I'm going to use uniform continuity of f again. And how do I use this? I say that, see, look here, f is a function, f is a continuous function on closed interval AB, right? So which means that the extreme value theorem applies, which means that the supremum of f is going to be realized at some point of the interval xi plus 1. So they're saying there was going to be a point ci in the interval xi plus 1 such that the supremum of f, that is capital Mi, is going to be realized at the point fci. And likewise, the same thing applies to the infimum of f. There is going to be a di such that the supremum of f over the interval, the infimum of f over the interval xi minus 1 is going to be realized at this point. So what am I using here? I'm using the fact that f is a continuous function defined on a compact set. So which means that the image of f is also going to be a compact set, which means it's going to be a closed and bounded. So these two suprema and infima are also going to be realized. Is that okay? Does everybody realize that? Much more than that, what we need to realize is what is the advantage of all of that? The advantage of all of that is now I can write this sum as, so this quantity which is the supremum of f on the ith subinterval is now I can replace it by fci, and this is fdi, right? Where what is important is ci and di are some points in the ith subinterval xi plus 1. Remember, the length of the ith subinterval xi plus 1, we have been very carefully chosen as at most delta, which means that I can appeal to the uniform continuity of f to say that the points fci and fdi are almost the distance epsilon apart. So which means that this is true. This is at most epsilon, which means that I can pull this out. This is epsilon times b minus a. Right? And if you want to be very, very careful, instead of epsilon here, let me have an epsilon by b by a here, which means that I will have an epsilon by b minus a here, which means that I will get an epsilon here. Right. So what have I done? I have shown that there is a partition P of the interval AB such that the upper sums and the lower sum do not differ by the prescribed value epsilon. And since epsilon was arbitrarily chosen by theorem 1, we are done. So I'll just say apply theorem 1 to conclude. So, the uniform continuity of F plays a very, very critical role as far as. So, are there any questions? Yeah. Is this okay with everybody?
Ma'am, can you please explain why FCI minus FDI, that sum was replaced by less than epsilon by b minus a?
So Priyanshu, that's the meat of the sort of proof here. So what am I trying to say? I am going to use this uniform continuity of F. Ci and di are both points in the ith subinterval. Yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
so let me write that down here. Ci and di are both points in the ith subinterval xi plus 1. Yeah. And we have been very careful in choosing the points of this partition. The points of this partition are chosen such that they are at most delta distance apart. Right?
Yes.
And Ci and Di are both, so if let's say Xi is here, Xi plus 1 is here, Ci and Di are inside this. Yeah, at most they are the endpoints, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. Which means that the length of Ci and Di are at most delta distance apart. So I can apply this uniform continuity of F to show that F of Ci minus F of Di in absolute value is at most epsilon by b minus a. Yeah, so that's just an adjustment. What is important is that the distance is. So the trick is just to appeal to the uniform continuity, exploit that to construct the partition. How do we construct this partition? That is the sort of important thing here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is that okay, Priyanshu?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes. How about everybody else?
Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, uniform continuity is necessary over here, right? To
Yes,
replace.
very much, very much, very much. If we did not have a uniform continuity, this delta would vary with the point, and then how do we choose the partition?
Okay, ma'am.
Right? It's very much required here. Yeah, so all of this says that given an interval AB, closed and bounded interval, compact set, and F a continuous function there, it follows that F is integrable. Is this okay? Is this okay with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the next thing, one should ask is, what about functions with discontinuity? Yeah, so let's just take some examples. I think having defined so many things, introduced so much notation, I think we'll just focus on examples. So let me take an example of a function which fails to be continuous. So let's take this example. So let's take something very simple. Let's consider the interval 0, 1 and let f be defined as follows. So let's say f is 0 if x is half and it is 1 otherwise. Yeah. So clearly this function has a discontinuity at the point half, right? So we cannot appeal to this theorem too directly, but I say that still this function is going to be integrable. Let's see how. Yeah? So what do? I am going to appeal to theorem 1, yeah, in order to show that this function is integrable, right? So I am going to say that let's fix some positive epsilon, and I am going to show that there is a partition of the interval AB such that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than epsilon. So let's see, how do I construct this partition? Yeah, so this is point 0 and this is 1, and I have to construct a partition. Okay? See, so let's fix epsilon positive. We will construct a partition which contains a very small subinterval around the point of discontinuity, right? So what is the point of discontinuity? The point of discontinuity is 1 by 2. Yeah? So my suggestion is, let's do the following. Yeah, so I'm going to look at this point, which is 1 by 2 minus, let's say, epsilon by 3. And I'm going to look at this point, which is 1 by 2 plus epsilon by 3. Yeah? So I'm going to look at the partition of the interval A01 in the following manner. Yeah. So let's consider P as, so this is x1, x2, x3, x4. So this be a partition of the interval 0, 1. So I have to give you what are x0, x1, x2, x3, x4, right? So endpoints, there is no choice, right? X1 has to be equal to 0 and x4 has to be equal to 1. This is by the definition of the partition. I say that let's consider x2 to be the point 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3, and let's consider x3 to be the point 1 by 2 plus epsilon by 3. Yeah? So I am constructing a partition containing a very small subinterval around the point of discontinuity, right? Now, what is the advantage of doing this, right? So let me construct, let me sort of compute the upper sum corresponding to this partition minus the lower sum corresponding to this partition, right? So what is it by definition? Let's do that, right? So what would be this? So the first thing would be the supremum of f. Let me write that down. Maybe that will help better. So the first thing would be, I'm looking at the upper sum, the supremum of f restricted to the interval 0 to x1, x2. Yeah, 1 by 2 minus, sorry, let me just take epsilon by 3 minus epsilon by 3 times the length of this subinterval. Yeah, which means what is the length of this subinterval? 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3 minus 0, right? So I'm going to let me write all the terms corresponding to the upper sum first, right? The second term would be the supremum of f restricted to the interval x2, x3, right? So x belongs to, x2 is, so let me just write x2, x3, and the length of the subinterval x to x3, which means it is 2 epsilon by 3, correct? And what is the contribution from the last one? It is the supremum of f restricted to the interval x3, x4, and the length of the interval x3, x4, which means that 1 minus 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3, right? So which is 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And now let's look at the terms coming from the lower sum. So it is going to be the infimum of f. So likewise, you know, it's a similar thing. All you have to do is just replace the supremum now by the infimum. So x coming from 0 to x1 to x2. I have the length of this subinterval, which is the following, and then the infimum of f times 2 epsilon by 3. So let me just clarify, where is this infimum? Over the interval x to x3, and the last term is the infimum of f over the subinterval x3, x4 times 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, so let me write down here so that all of you can see. Let's just recall what was our function. Our function was defined like this. Yeah, f was 0 for x less than half, and f was 1 otherwise. Right. So then, what is going to happen? What would be the first term? So let me write here. So that means that what is going to be the supremum of f over this interval? That's going to be 0, right? You know, we actually need not care about these subintervals away from the discontinuity because the function is constant there. So the supremum is going to sort of cancel out with the infimum. But anyways, let me just do it. So the supremum here is going to be what? It's going to be 0, right? 0 times 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3. Is that correct? Please do correct me if I make a mistake. Yeah. And what happens to x2, x3? x2 is a point slightly to the left of 1 by 2. So which means that this is 1 times 2 epsilon by 3. And then what happens to x3, x4? The function is 1 there. So this is 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3. And what is the infimum? The infimum is 0. Is that correct? Is everybody with me? Minus the infimum over this. This is again 0. And the last term would be, what is the last term? The infimum over x3, x4, which means that it is again 1. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So then what do I get? Looking at these terms, so what do I get? So it is some 2 epsilon by 3 plus 1 by 2 minus epsilon by 3 minus 1 by 2 plus epsilon by 3. Correct? So which means that these two terms cancel out. So this is 2 epsilon by 3, which is less than epsilon. So do you see what makes the proof work? Why do I choose this partition? You just choose a very small partition that sort of takes care of the point of the discontinuity. So although this function has a point of discontinuity, but it still continues to be integrable. Is that okay? Is this example okay with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So in general, you have to construct a partition with somewhat more complicated parts, possibly using continuity or discontinuity. So I gave you one example of an honest function which is integrable. Honest, some function, which is not continuous, something which doesn't follow from theorem. I think I'll just give you one example of a function which is not integrable, and then we stop, right? So let me take one more example. Okay, let's consider the indicator function of rationals. Yeah, so it is 1 if x is rational and it is 0 otherwise. Right. So I claim that f is not integrable on any AB for any interval AB. So again, I'm going to appeal to theorem 1, which says that what does theorem 1 say? We call what is the statement of theorem 1? Let's just go up and see. So I'm going to appeal to this theorem. This says that f is integrable provided for every epsilon positive there is a partition of the interval AB so that the upper and the lower sum do not differ by more than epsilon. So I'm going to say that no matter what partition P of the interval AB I take, the upper and the lower sum are at a positive distance apart. Yeah. So let's see. So it's actually evident from the definition, but let me sort of write it down because we are sort of new to this idea of integration. So how do I sort of substantiate my claim? Let P be any partition of the interval AB. Yeah, you take your favorite interval and let's take your favorite partition. Yeah. So let me write the points in P as x1, x2, xn, and suppose that this is any partition of the interval AB, right? So then, no matter where we are, which subinterval we are, let's make the following observation. Yeah, so for each subinterval xi plus 1, what do we have? We know that the supremum of f over this subinterval xi plus 1, what is this going to be? The way the function is defined. What is the supremum of f going to be over the ith subinterval?
1.
1. And what about the infimum?
0.
Infimum is going to be 0 no matter where we are. Yeah, so this is in our notation the little mi. So which means that if I look at the upper sum and the lower sum and I take the difference, yeah, so the difference is, what is it? It is corresponding to this partition. So this is going to be mi, capital Mi minus little I times the length of the ith subinterval. Yeah. But no matter which I we are, capital Mi is 1 and little mi is 0, which means that this is going to be the summation of xi plus 1 minus xi, which is nothing but the length of the subinterval b minus a. So what do? You take that, you say that let's fix some epsilon naught positive, which is strictly less than b minus a. Yeah? And let's look at any possible partition of the interval AB. Then the upper sum and the lower sum differ by b minus a, which is bigger than epsilon naught. I took a strict inequality here, so let me put a second one. So it follows from theorem 1 that this function f is not Riemann integrable on the interval ab. No matter what a and b are. Yeah, is that okay? Is everybody with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so I think this is a good point to stop. We have seen an example of a function which is integrable and an example of a function which is non-integrable. Are there any questions?